1. Okay, call it what you want, but I'm calling it a ghost story, not only because I think so, but because I really wanted it to be. First off, for context, upon moving in, we had weird things happen to various family members throughout our year living in this less than a decade-old subdivision home. Weirdly enough, this isn't the only house or experience that mine or a family member has had. It's always made me wonder if something or multiple somethings have attached onto us. I have this really old family album that has tin photos, so late 1800s, early 1900s, and from my understanding, sometimes in those photos people were dead, so it's always made me question if that something was attached to it. Or I just have really bad luck renting places. Anyways, on to the story. This has to be almost 8 years ago. It was like January because it was snowing and we had a school cancellation. I was 16 at the time, I'm female by the way, and had been up at midnight playing the new Xbox One we had just got for Christmas in the living room. I had headphones on, and one ear played the sound and the other had nothing. While I was playing, I thought I'd heard a thud coming from near the front. Shook it off and put it down to my 11-year-old brother moving around in his room playing his game, and since I've always had bad hearing, I must have mistook the direction of the sound. I go back to playing, and less than an hour later, I heard what I thought was the front door go thud again. At this point, I'm freaked out. My true crime-loving butt went and did the most reasonable thing and went and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. I peer out the peephole of the door and see nothing and no one except the streetlights and the orangish midnight sky. At this point, my 14-year-old sister, whose bedroom is above the front door, comes down to see what's going on. We're all night owls. I tell her what I heard, and she looks out the peephole too. We're talking about it, and all of a sudden the loudest bang hits the front door, scaring the piss out of me. We run up the stairs towards the bedrooms. My sister and I are in the hallway as we decide to look out the windows to see if we can see anything or anyone. Nothing. At this point, my heart is racing. But the best for last was just about to come, as my sister and I are out of view of the windows. We can't be seen, but we can see at an angle, and a rock comes flying at our window. Cue us running like no other to our parents' room. We wake them up and tell them about what was going on. My dad was grumpy, but was now convinced by my mother due to our sheer panic, so he goes to look. First the window, the peephole, and then he opened the door. Nothing. Worst and scariest of all is when we went outside, there had to have been 5 inches of snow covering the ground. To our surprise, there were no footprints, none. No prints at the front door, walkway, driveway, sidewalk, or road, except for the ones we made after we went outside. Not even tire marks from passing cars from earlier that evening. It would have been impossible to knock on the door with not only I but my sister hearing clearly, nor throw a rock outside so hard it hit our second-story window without being in the yard of the house. 2. I never thought I would end up working at a funeral home. However, I found that job opportunities were limited, and when I came across the listing in the local paper, the money was too good to pass up. They even had an attached residence that I could live in rent-free, to ensure I was always on hand, since I was their only security guard. Sometimes the job can be somewhat unnerving. Being surrounded by death on a daily basis takes its toll on a person. But I remind myself that I'm here to keep the place secure and to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Every night before turning in, I take a walk through the building to ensure that all the doors are locked and the lights are off. I check the mourners attending evening services if one is scheduled, making sure that they aren't causing any trouble or breaking any rules. I get up periodically throughout the night to make my rounds and ensure all is well. If I hear anything out of the ordinary, I investigate it. At first, I thought that the job here would be a piece of cake. All I had to do was patrol the building at night, keep an eye on the cameras, and ensure that no one tries to break in. Beyond the morbid appeal this place provides for young thrill-seekers, there are also chemicals stored here that an enterprising criminal could use in the manufacture of narcotics, so intruders were a concern worth noting. However, as I settled into my new role, I began to realize that the job was more than I had anticipated. The funeral home itself was pretty creepy, with dimly lit hallways and creaky old doors. Every time I walked down one of these dark corridors, I could not help but feel like someone or something was watching me. Sometimes I hear strange noises coming from the other side of the walls. Sometimes I see a shadow flash past in the corners of my vision. Sometimes I swear that I can feel a cold breath on the back of my neck. Despite my unease, I try to remain professional. After all, I am here to keep the place secure, not to be spooked by every little sound. However, as the nights wear on, I find it harder and harder to shake the feeling that something is not quite right. It wasn't until a few weeks into the job that things began to get strange. I was doing my usual rounds when I heard a noise coming from one of the rooms we used to store the prepped bodies in their caskets for upcoming funerals. It sounded like something was shuffling around in there. I tried to tell myself that there was a reasonable explanation, but I could not shake the feeling that something was not right. As I approached the door to the room, my heart started to race. I wondered if I was just acting paranoid, but the noise was unmistakable. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I reached for the doorknob. I hesitated for a moment, trying to gather my courage. Finally, I turned the knob and pushed the door open, just a crack, trying to peek inside without making too much noise. The room was dark, but I could make out the shape of a casket in the center of the room. I tried to remember if there was a funeral scheduled for the morning, but I couldn't recall seeing the schedule that day. I listened for a moment, but the shuffling noise had stopped. I pushed the door open a little further, and that's when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, my hand reaching for the flashlight on my belt, but there was nothing there. My heart was pounding now, and I could feel the sweat starting to form in my forehead. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room, shining my flashlight around. The casket was still in the center of the room, and there didn't seem to be anything else out of place, but I could not shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I finished my patrol of the room quickly and made my way back to my apartment, trying to calm my nerves. It was going to be a long night. The next night, I heard the noise again. My heart sank as I realized the sound was not just in my head, but was coming from the same room as before. Once again, I decided to investigate this issue. I slowly made my way down the hallway, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. As I approached the door, my palms began to sweat and my breath became shallow. My personal experiences have taught me to remain calm under pressure. However, this was a different kind of fear. I pushed the door open slowly and peered inside, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. To my surprise, there was nothing there. No people, no animals, no signs of any disturbance. The room was empty, and the only thing that greeted me was an eerie silence. I stood there for a few moments, trying to make sense of what I heard. Was it just my imagination, playing tricks on me? Had I been up too late? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I also couldn't find any logical explanation for the noise. As I made my way back to my room, my mind was racing with thoughts and questions. Was there something in the funeral home that I didn't know about? I did not want to jump to any conclusions, but I knew that I had to keep my guard up and stay alert. As the nights go on, the strange noises persist, and I began to feel like I'm being watched. It's as if someone or something is following me through the halls. Every time I turn around, I expect to see a figure looming in the shadows, but there's never anything there. I start to become increasingly paranoid. I double-check the locks on the doors and windows every hour, just to make sure they're secure. I even start carrying a sidearm with me on my rounds just in case. Things just continue to become even stranger. One night as I was sitting in my apartment, I heard a series of strange noises coming from outside. At first I thought it was just the wind. The sounds grew louder and more persistent until they sounded like someone knocking at the door. I tried to ignore it, thinking that it was probably just some kids playing a prank. But the knocking continued, growing more insistent by the minute. It was as if someone was desperately trying to get my attention. Feeling a sense of unease, I cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. To my surprise, there was no one there. The hallway was completely empty, and there was no sign of anyone lurking in the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As I returned to my apartment, I felt a chill blow past me into the apartment. Once inside, I couldn't help but notice that the atmosphere had changed. The air felt thick and heavy, and there was an unexplained chill that seemed to permeate through every corner of the room. Uncomfortable, I retreated to my bedroom, hoping to get my mind off of the night's events. However, the knocking continued sporadically throughout the night, each time causing my heart to race with fear. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the persistent tapping at the door made it clear that it was not. That's the moment when I realized I can't take it anymore. I need to find out what's causing these noises and put an end to it. The next day, I decided to talk to the funeral home director about my concerns. I half expect him to laugh it off and tell me I'm crazy. But to my surprise, he takes me seriously. He tells me that the funeral home has been rumored to be haunted for years, and that some of the staff have reported strange occurrences in the past. As time goes on, my interactions with the spirits are becoming more frequent and intense. I often hear whispers in my ear or feel a cold breath on my neck. Some nights the spirits become angry and throw objects around the room. I've taken to talking to them as I make my rounds, as it makes me more comfortable, and I believe it helps to calm the spirits. I've begun to realize that not all spirits behave the same. Some are friendly and curious, whereas others are vengeful and aggressive. It's as if they each have their own stories to tell, and I am the only one who can hear them. Despite my growing attachment to the spirits, I still had moments of fear and doubt. There are nights when I hear something so terrifying that I just freeze in place, too afraid to move. But then a warm feeling comes over me, reminding me that I was not alone, and that everything is going to be okay. I started to document my experiences in a journal, detailing the encounters I had with the spirits and the strange occurrences that happened each night. I've even begun to research the history of the funeral home, hoping to uncover clues about the spirits' identities and motives. I haven't had much luck yet, but I'm optimistic. Although my job is unusual, I find a sense of purpose in my interactions with the dead. I know what I'm doing is something important, something that no one else could do as well. And who knows, maybe one day I'll even be able to solve the mystery of this place and help the spirits find peace. 3. To start, I have never experienced paranormal activity, but I've been a huge fan of it and wonder what it would be like if it happened to me. Well, it did, and here's the story. It started on January 5th. I started to hear something coming from my wall when I turned my fans off to clean, and I thought I was hearing things until I put my ear to it and heard it get louder. On the wall faced east towards my dad's room and the side door, and was next to the front door. I thought the noise could be our landlord working, or someone else, maybe even the TV in my dad's room, since the living room is consistently empty, causing a silence throughout the house whenever the AC was shut off. When it was on, everything would be louder, because the silence is replaced with the cooling sound of the AC unit. So when the silence was present, it was very clear. I could hear everything. This noise just appeared, and it sounded like mumbles, as if someone was speaking in a literal twisted tongue. All I heard were straight mumbles of incomprehensible words. I couldn't sound out a complete word this voice in my wall mumbled or anything. I could check the other side of my wall, and the minute I heard this noise, nothing. Not a single voice here in the living room, there's just silence. I even tried knocking on the wall a little, or something, to act like I wanted to disturb whoever was mumbling, on both sides, and nothing changed. After that day, I heard it whenever I slept, ate in my room, did anything with my fans off, but even if I dropped everything and went into the living room to go hear this mumbling, nothing. If I went to my wall, of course, I would hear it, but I wanted to know why I could only hear it in my room. Keep in mind, I'm fascinated with this, it's just all of a sudden, so it's abrupt. Fast forward a few weeks. We're now on January 27th. That early morning around 12:30, about 12:34, I heard it in my ear, directly, the mumbles of something. I don't even remember clearly what I heard. It woke me up, though I was awoken to my closet lamp being on and my room being completely dark. I have one lamp in my room and another in my closet, with my TV being my main light of my room. Everything was off but my closet light, and I swear someone was standing right there, compressed against the door. I could see the shadow so vividly it was like it was me in there. I use my closet as a closed space to just relax and listen to music. It's only like 7 feet of space in there, and I'm the only one to use it. Out of the 22 days of this mumbling, this is the brighter side of my paranormal activity. I got up immediately, and as I walked to the closet, I didn't just open the door, no, I looked under the door. And someone with a hollowed pupil and grayish-white skin color, at best, was looking through the tiny crack I could see in my closet. The space is about an inch or half wide, and I know what I saw. I know what I saw. I didn't get scared and jumped. I got hyper-ecstatic. I started to be like, okay, what is that and why is it in my closet? For about 2 minutes until I saw the shadow was gone. Clear light on the floor now. I know what I saw, and I saw a very clear difference. I open up my door and slowly feel coldness come out. In my mind, I'm just absolutely fascinated. I really do wonder what the hell this is. That feeling I had seeing my closet empty and the light just on, it felt like instead it was standing behind me. But I didn't bother turning around scared. I turned my light off, and when I turned around to go back into bed, in the dark, yes, and in the dark I just felt the cold in my skin, chest, legs, everywhere, and knew it was either in front of someone or in front of my fan. Even though I didn't move at all, and I'm still at my closet door. I kept my peace and walked through it, and got goosebumps from the feeling of walking through whatever was in front of me in the darkness. I got into bed and just stared into the darkness, and specifically my TV. I didn't sleep, and because of my fans and AC unit being on, that mumbling was the least of my concerns, so I just stayed up, and realized I got what I asked for. With it being 2 months since this, the voice is gone, and the activity is completely gone too. I didn't do anything. You and I are the only ones that know. I don't really want to speak on it with anyone else. Your opinion? 4. For some background, our neighborhood is full of houses, probably built in the 80s. They're not that old, but old enough for some to look abandoned. We don't live in the suburbs or anything. It's a very small neighborhood on top of a low hill, right next to a small forest. We live very close to each other, so late-night parties are a no-no around here. You got the picture now, so I'll get on with it. I've only moved once, but it was at a very young age. Our old house is right next door. Because I was so young, I'm not sure if there were any occurrences before the move or not. However, I remember a bunch while I've been living here. I'll start with the more regular things. Only at night, I hear footsteps on the roof. They're very clear, quick footsteps, almost as if someone or something is running on the roof. My room is on the second floor, so the roof is right above me. I decided to ask my father about this once, and my sister chimed in, saying she hears it too. I guess he didn't really have an explanation, since he didn't even respond to my question in any way other than a chuckle. Another common thing is door handles and doors being constantly flung open and shut up and down. I distinctly remember that our parents' room door flung open, not a slow creaky sound, a swing. The only people in the house were me and my sister, and the dogs were with my dad's wife. Sometimes our things would be misplaced, even completely missing. Maybe that's just our minds playing tricks, but it's way too frequent. Here's the interesting part, I guess. Maybe not as interesting as you expect. It was some months ago, somewhere in October. I was home alone, which isn't that unusual for me. Parents at work, sisters at practice. The house isn't exactly new, so it makes those creepy sounds you'd hate at night. Well, it was just those sounds that made me walk out of my room. The stairs lead straight to the front door, so I could see from upstairs that it was open. I yelled out for my dad or his wife, even my sister. No answer. I yelled again, still silence. Annoyed, I make my way down the stairs, only to be shocked by the fact that nobody was in the driveway. I instantly slammed the door shut and began panicking. Was there an intruder inside? A murderer? Or maybe some random homeless person? Well, the first thing my brain told me was run back up to my room and stay there until someone got home. I waited there, scared out of my mind that someone would be in the house. When my dad's wife came home, only around 10 minutes later, I told her about it right away. She grabbed a long kitchen knife and started searching the house. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We checked everywhere, just you name it. The closets, attic, even the chimney, nothing. I was frantically sobbing the entire search. Up to this day, everyone swears that they locked the door after themselves. I knew they did, because I always check after they leave. Another incident, which happened way back, somewhere in the winter. As per usual, the running sound of the roof. It was happening again. At this point, we had been living in this house for almost a year. I got sick of it this time and went downstairs to sleep in my parents' room. I still heard it. It just wasn't as loud. Strangely enough, it wasn't on the roof anymore. The sound was slowly making its way down to the side of the house. I freaked out and saw my parents doing too. They tried to calm me down as my dad went outside to check what it might be. I fell asleep before he came back, so I'm not sure what happened. I've tried asking him, but he won't tell me anything. I still wonder what happened that night. I know some of this might sound like some sort of silly nightmares or things I've been imagining. I've thought it was my mind playing tricks, since our family has a history of bad mental health altogether. My dad's wife's side, at least. If anybody has an explanation for any of this, please help me out. Have I invented some sort of spirit? Is it a demon? Or is it something completely different? I don't know. I really just wanted to get this all off my chest. 5. I will start by saying, even having these experiences, I've always been a skeptic. My mother, who's passed 9 years ago, was toward the end of her life a deep believer, as well as both of my sisters. Though after my mother's passing, they have not spoken much on the subject, unless asked about it. But they can verify 3 or 4 of the stories I'm about to lay out here as well. The first 3 of these stories take place in my childhood home, in a trailer park that always seemed to have an odd vibe around it in general. Never found anything weird out about it, but we always had this theory, like Indian burial grounds or something, but I doubt it. Just a weird little ritual area in southwest Michigan. The 4th story takes place at my father and stepmother's house, about 8 miles north of the house the first 3 stories take place in. I'll start with what I feel is the least intense, moving to the ones that still spark great fear in me. Story 1. I'll start with the story at my father and stepmother's house, as it's pretty simple. I lived there in my early 20s and had the classic downstairs basement room. I was the black sheep of sorts, so it was only fitting to put me there. We had a dog that always stayed with me, especially when the family was out doing whatever. This happened multiple times. But I'll share the last time I remember it happening. I'm sitting downstairs hanging out, YouTube or whatever I was doing, when my dog, like he normally does when people come home, starts going nuts, barking and pacing for me to let him upstairs so he can greet whoever he believes came through the door. As I get out of my chair to let him do so, I hear the classic footsteps of what I believe is my little brother, as they're too fast to be my father or stepmom. I hear them go all the way back to the back of the house and stay there. So I let the dog out, and I follow suit thinking maybe my folks need help grabbing something they may have brought home. Get upstairs, nothing at all, lights off, no one home. Dog is even thinking, well, what the hell? Now, at this point, this is the 4th or 5th time this has happened in the few years we've been living there, mostly starting in the latter part of those years. So this time, I felt ballsy about it. I decided like an idiot to just ask if anyone was there. No answer. So I go further into the house, facing the hallway leading to the back of the house to a couple of bedrooms. I put myself in a bathroom so that when I yell at it, I won't see down the hallway when it comes to get my sorry ass. But I get in the bathroom, and like an idiot, I somewhat angrily yelled, "Who the fuck's in my house?" At this point, I hear something fall in the back bathroom between the two bedrooms. I poke my head out to verify no one is there, check the garage to see no one is there, and then went back downstairs, where I waited for people to actually come home. It's not the wildest story ever, but eerie to me. Story 2. This is where, to me, these stories amp up and really get freaky. Just something about this trailer park in the trailer I lived in. This was after moving in the trailer with my mom, who my dad then took over after their divorce and was now living there with my stepmom. So, I remember it being maybe 2006. I was maybe 13 or so, and at the time loved being up late as it was summer vacation from school. And this summer, I liked smoking pot with my sister late at night in the backyard with the neighbor boy. This night no pot, just us three hanging out smoking cigarettes and talking. For some reason or another, my sister takes her phone out, and I kid you not, for some reason starts recording an audio file. This was on a shit Nokia phone at the time, and the quality is already bad on these things, but recording nonetheless. Not for anything paranormal, but thinking about it now, I don't remember for the life of me what she was trying to record. Point is, as she's recording, we're all standing there, when all of a sudden, about 2 to 4 feet from my right, we hear the most unsettling, blood-curdling, just a nasty woman's scream for a solid 2 seconds, immediately being like, "What in the fuck was that?" Even getting so worked up that we called the police, who didn't find anything after showing up 20 minutes later. Best part, my sister the next day realized she'd been recording this audio file, so she goes into her phone to review it, realizing she had never thought to stop the recording. But there it was in her phone, so we listened back to it. Everything is normal. You can hear us talking right up until this scream, which, when this happens in the recording, you hear us go quiet. Then, a very static type silence, and then you hear us all go, "What in the fuck was that?" Then the recording cuts off a few seconds later. I always said it was a fox, but with how loud it was and how close it was, the sound should have been on this recording, but it most definitely was not. Thoughts? Now, I have a hard time with these last 2 stories, as they are the only visual experiences I have, and to me are the absolute hardest to explain. Kinda leaves me feeling out of my wits even thinking about them, let alone about typing it all out. Story 3. So to start, my mom was always a night owl, no exception even when we lived with her until 2005. I think this is somewhere around 2002 or 2003. The bedroom I was in was right next to where the kitchen was, and you could in fact see right out into the kitchen, but couldn't see the table where we sat from here, as the angle cut off that view. But it would have been off to the right of the bedroom door looking out. I remember waking up about 3 or 4 a.m. or so, and looking out and seeing the dining room light on, and hearing my mom using her sewing machine at the table. So I yell for her to come in here. I hear the machine stop, and she comes to the doorway. I just remember the most menacing, horrifying, mean look on her face as she stood there, staring right at me, no words, no nothing. Just this look like, why are you talking to me right now? I don't really remember at this point if I said or did anything while she was stood there doing this, but just as quick as she was standing there, she just as quickly, still with no words at all, turned first her head away, then her body followed suit. And then she just walked away. This, as most would assume, is very much unlike most anyone's mom. I very much remember as soon as she was out of sight, I started screaming and crying, and yet again I heard her get up from her sewing machine, this time a little more frantic. She comes in asking what's wrong, with the classic mom calming down horrified kid going on, so I told her what I literally saw, and she said very plainly that she had not just been in here, and she had been at the sewing machine the whole time. And it is not like my mom to just come in and stare me down menacingly like that, especially at 3 a.m. to scare me. Thoughts? Story 4. My least favorite of these. I don't like even thinking about this one, but it's the one I wanted to bring here the most, and I just want to know what others may be thinking this thing is. So again, much like the last story, it's 3 or 4 in the morning. I'm in the exact same bedroom, bottom bunk, sister is on top. This time everyone is asleep, all lights in the house off, and it's pretty quiet. I hear what I believe is a slightly heavy load in our dryer, or maybe the washer washing a little off balance. This sound wakes me all the way up because it just seems weird. So I roll over to get more comfy and I open my eyes a bit. As I'm looking around, I see what is some movement toward the kitchen. Now again, you can see from this room out into the kitchen, but not the dining area. What you saw from my perspective is the island in the kitchen where the sink was. And you can see a little of the far side of our living room behind that. So I'm kind of scanning the kitchen, listening to this weird sound I keep hearing. And that's when I see it. I can't say it was standing, as I saw no legs, but standing or stood behind the island, but extremely tall, is this very plain, almost 2D looking man, all white, no features whatsoever, no face, no nothing. As you looked down his body, it appeared to be more faint, but still a definite white figure or person just stood there. At first I'm thinking it's headlights hitting the window from a car outside, but then I realize that this thing has a cowboy-type hat on. And not only that, it seems like it's taking its hat off, and like tipping its hat in my direction. Like it's tipping its hat at me almost. Now at this point, I'm genuinely trying to make sure I'm 100% awake, and I am. So I go back to looking because, naturally, I just cannot look away now. And it just repeats the same exact movements over and over. Pulls the hat down, puts it back on, pulls it down, then back on. All the while, this weird sound's still happening. So I'm trying to justify in my mind by thinking somehow the neighbor kid is playing a prank on me, and is somehow outside the window. That's a bit behind this thing, using some sort of puppet or something. But when I realize how stupid a thought this is, that's when I started screaming. My sister wakes up and asks what the hell is going on, and I tell her exactly what I see and ask her if she sees it too. Oddly no, she doesn't at all. This makes me scream more, this time waking up my mom, who, as she comes into the kitchen, turns on the light. Disappeared in a moment. Though I still hear the strange sound, so I ask my mom what the sound is, and if the washer is going. She goes and looks, neither machine is running, and for whatever reason this woman takes one look at me, feels my head to see if I have a fever, which I didn't, and then tells me I have a fever and that's why I'm seeing stuff like that. So I try and calm. She leaves the room and turns the kitchen light back off. And sure enough, there's this guy again, still tipping his hat over and over. I manage to roll over and fall asleep somehow after. I still mention this story to my sister, and she still vividly remembers every bit. I always said it was Hatman, but the thing is, what I've read and heard on Hatman, it's not anything like this. My mother later also recounted this story, and later told me that although she didn't see or hear what I did, she only told me that I had a fever and stuff to calm me down. And she knew that it wasn't a fever causing it. Thoughts? Those are my stories. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 319. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please pop a like before you go, thank you kindly. Okay, there is no other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: what is the worst haircut experience you've ever had? I'm going to call out my sister here, because for years, just because, it's cheaper and she has the clippers, my sister trims my hair for me. Except many, many years ago now, and I wasn't even that mad at it, to be honest with you. But she went to trim my hair, but she forgot to put the guard on the clippers. And so she just basically trimmed it right down to the scalp of a patch. So I had a bald patch. This was back in the days when I had more hair, I must add, for a while till it grew out. I think she was far more shocked about it than I was. I was mildly annoyed, but really not angry at all. But what are some of yours that you're willing to share? Please do pop your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.